Welcome to the channel, everybody. Today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite Cub Cadets, the Cub Cadet 982. Now the 982 is the largest Cub Cadet model that was ever produced. It was released in the fall of 1979. An International Harvester ran it until spring of 1981 when they'd sold to the MTD Cub Cadet Corporation out of Cleveland, Ohio. Now, Cub Cadet continued to build garden tractors into the 90s, the super garden tractors, and I'm going to focus on a little bit of models and history up till 1989. First, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 982 and the history about it and why it came about. 982 is my favorite, mostly for the fact, like I said, it was the largest one, had larger tires, reduction in gear drive to make it have stronger pulling. You could get a 3-point hitch, a rear PTO for this. It was the only Cub Cadet to ever introduce and have and own an engine. So it had a 19.9 B48G own engine. Cub Cadet always used Kohler in the past. Sometimes they would use some Briggs and Stratton in their more economy lines, but this was the first and only one that International built with an own engine. Now in 1974, when International introduced the Quiet Line series, I did some videos on this before going over the history of them as well, you can check out. That was the longest running series that International Harvester had ran. They'd ran that starting in 1974 and they ran it through 1979 till the 82 series was released like you see here. Now just 1 year later, 1975, John Deere introduced their Model 400. Now I'm pretty sure that the Model 400 really caught the attention of the IH designers, especially in the Cub Cadet line, because that was a pretty big deal back in 1975. Now the John Deere 400 was powered by a 20 horsepower Kohler engine, and it also had the options for a Category 0 3-point hitch and a 2000 RPM rear PTO. They also had front auxiliary outlets and for other accessories. Now that doesn't seem like a big deal back in the day, but the 400 had larger front and rear tires on it, the same as like the 982. But the key feature of the 400 was you could get a 60-inch mower deck with that. Now, back then, to get a 60-inch mower deck, especially if you were an estate owner or anything, you either had to get like an Allis-Chalmers 720, the Simplicity version, the 90/20 Power Max, or you had to get like a Cub Lowboy. Now, they still offered right around the same horsepower, the 20 horsepower mark, but they were more giant tractors and more clumsy, and they were probably a lot more money than when these smaller tractors came out. So when John Deere introduced that, I'm sure that was a very big deal back in the 70s, and the 400 and the 420 did John Deere very well all the way into the 90s. Now I don't want to focus all on John Deere, but John Deere is what I'm pretty sure got this started. So when International went 1979 to the 82 series, I would almost bet, because of John Deere's 400, that's why the 982 was born. So 26 by 12 by 12s, 18 by 8, 5 by 8s on the front, little different front axle. The 982 offered 3-point hitches, rear PTOs, etc. I'm going to go ahead and grab the camera. I'm going to walk around the 982, talk a little bit about the International built 982, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the models that followed it after the sale to MTD and the rest of the Super Garden Tractor models. Hope you guys like this video and there's some information in it. Let me grab the camera. Let's get started. All right, hopefully the wind doesn't get me too bad here. I'm trying to stay out as much as I can, but in Ohio it seems like you can never escape it. So 982 was introduced fall of 1979 when IH come out with this, and they ran it till the spring of 1981, and that's when International Harvester sold the Cub Cadet line to MTD, which became the Cub Cadet Corporation. Now, I'll go on with them models after that. I want to focus on the IH one right now. This is an IH 982 that I have here, one of the early ones. Now, when they came out with this 982, like I said, the frame was stretched to 78.5 inches long. They went to 26 by 12 by 12 rear tires, and they went to 18 by 8 5 by 8s on the front. So the front tires on the 982 were the rear tires on the Cadet line. So the 182, 282, 382, them were the rear tires. These were the front. So sort of interesting there. One of the other things they did do with the Cub Cadet 982 is they did reduce the rear final drive, and that just gave it a little bit more increased pulling power with the larger front tires. So just like the rear ends when the Cub Cadet originally came out, you know, that was in the Cub, They put them in the Cub Cadets. They pretty much did the same thing with the 982. The front spindles, as you can see, and the axle bushings are what you would find in like a Cub Lowboy 184. So International, a lot of times used parts they already had on hand. This cut down on manufacturing and tooling new parts, and a lot of times with the Cub Cadet, it actually made it way stronger and overbuilt than what it needed to be. But that's why there's thousands of these tractors still lasting to this day. So options for the 982, you could get front auxiliary hydraulics, which this one does not have. You could get the dual brake pedals. This one surprisingly does have that. That was an option, the steering brake pedals. And on the rear, which I do not have here, you could get a category 0 3-point hitch with an optional 2000 RPM rear PTO. If you find one with the PTO in the rear, the PTO and the 3-point hitch, it definitely increases the value of these machines. One thing I will note, mine was an early 79. As you can see, my front grill's different. It don't have the black lines through here. It's got the screen. There was a recall on that. On the early models, IH recalled them. Grass and stuff will get stuck behind there and potentially cause a fire. So I like having that one. I don't mow with it, but for a historical collector's piece, I like to have it. 982 Onan B48G, 19.9 horsepower Pose twin engine. One thing with the 982, first one to ever use an Onan engine. They always use Kohler or some of the Briggs in their cheaper lines. Sunstrand direct drive hydrostat in this. Alright, so like I said, 1979 through spring of 1981, they made the International Harvester 982, as you see here, painted red and everything. Now, when IH sold to the MTD out of Cleveland, they did continue to build 982s up until 1985, when the IH sold the agricultural division to the Tenneco Case IH deal. Now, the little bit of difference they did do with an MTD build 982 is instead of the front axles being red like the IH, they were painted black, and the rear ends were also black on the MTD Cub Cadet Corporation ones. Now, after serial number 720,000, this cast iron rear end went to an aluminum rear end. The cast iron are definitely stronger, especially where it mounts and bolts to the frame underneath. If you ever find one of these used, be sure to climb underneath there and look at them ears on them transmissions. I'll throw some pictures on here and show you the weak spots of where they break. It usually doesn't happen. I never heard of any issues with the cast iron, but the aluminum, after time, these bolts get loose, and from flexing, if you don't keep an eye on them, you can crack them. It's fixable, but it costs money and it's a lot of time, tear down, etc. So just be sure to, check that out when purchasing one of these. Cast iron definitely stronger, but the axles were the weak point. Course spline IH axles in these, and honestly guys, the 982 is the only one I really hear about this the most. A lot of guys snap the axles in these 982s, and I don't know if it's with the larger tires, the reduction drive, but I have heard of more than one case where 982s plowing, that kind of stuff, they'll snap the axles in them. The course spline just weren't that strong. The casing was, but the axles weren't. So the aluminum rear ends have the fine spline axles, definitely way stronger than the IH built ones. Best way to combat that problem, I've done videos on this. I'm not going to do it to this one because this is more of just a collector's thing, but you can get a 2-piece carrier and the fine spline axles, and you can put them right there in the cast iron case, and you never have to worry about it. You won't have to worry about it where it flexes at the frame. Now, if you do have one with an aluminum rear end, and I haven't got a set for my 1772 yet, but I'm going to, Extreme Motor Works, I'll put a link in the description below to their website. They make a lot of aftermarket stuff for Cub Cadets. I got some stuff from them on the 1772 already. They make a brace kit for them to fix that problem. Like I said, I am going to put them on my Super Diesel because I do plan on using that for plowing and stuff, and I don't ever want a chance snapping them ears off. All right, while MTD continue to paint them red, besides them 2 different color variations, everything else the same options you could get on them. They also made them and a yellow and white like the one you see behind me. Them were a 984 and a 986. Now the 984 was the same tractor, only it was yellow and white, and it had a 3-point hitch and rear PTO. If you got the 986, it was the same tractor, everything, only it had front auxiliary hydraulics with that. From what I could tell with the 984 and the 986, they were still badged the 982 with the yellow and white paint. The only difference was for ordering purposes. MTD was changing something. It was for ordering. It gave the options for the tractor. So 1985 rolled along. IH is gone, sadly. Case IH took over. They're not painting tractors red no more for the dealers. So now your only option is to get them in yellow and white. Now instead of continue calling it the 982, MTD changed it up. You got a 1912 and a 1914. The 1912 and 14 were identical to this, the same B48G own an engine, etc. Steering brakes were an option, all that stuff. The 1912 was your standard tractor. The 1914 came with 3-point hitch and rear PTO. Now 1912s and 14s, I'd say the 1914s are even more rare because most people didn't get the 3-point hitch option. It was a lot of money back then. You don't see them very often, and I think they're sort of on the rare side just because they were only made 85 and 86, and like I said, you just don't see them for sale that often. So after 1986 we roll into 1987, and that's when Cub Cadet even changed some more stuff up. 1987 you could get an 1872, a 2072, and also a 1572 diesel. We'll start off with the 1872. It was powered by an M18S Kohler engine in that one, and then the 2072 was powered by the M20S Kohler engine. Now I could never understand when Cub Cadet came out with these why they went with an 18 horse, you know, option. 18 to 20, it just doesn't seem, for 2 horsepower, I don't know if the price difference was that much, why you would even give that option for all the years running the own and 20 horse in the 982 line and all the other models, to come out with something with an 18 and a 20 horse. I just, if anyone knows any of that watching this video, please comment below because I'm sort of curious. Now they did come out with the 1572. That was the first super diesel, and it was powered by a Kubota D600, 15 horsepower, just like in the 1512 or the 782D, the same engine and everything. But for 1987, Cub Cadet did step it up, and power steering was now standard. So it was never an option before, but now the tractors come standard with power steering, and also the dual brakes were also a standard feature as well. So options for the 1872, 2072, and the 1572 were front auxiliary hydraulic outlets and a category 0 3-point hitch with a rear PTO. This 1772 of mine has the 3-point hitch, but it does not have the optional rear PTO. Now 2072s, the very early models of a 2072, you could get the Onan B48G. There's not many of them around, and I don't even know how many were produced, but there wasn't many. But Cub Cadet had some excess engines from their older models, and instead of, you know, just discarding them when they came out with the new model in 87, they, you know, to put the Kohlers in, they used up what they had, and when they got done, they switched to Kohler, and that was it. There is another guy on YouTube, I follow his channel. I'll throw a link in the description below on the video that he did. I'd check it out. He does a lot of good videos. Michael TJD60, he actually has a 2072 that was an early Onan that came that way, and he's got a really good video on it. It goes real more in depth than what I can on that. So if anyone wants to learn more about the 2072 with the Onan, be sure to click in the description and check his video out, and go ahead and check his channel out too. He's got a lot of good Cub Cadet videos. So 1989, Cub Cadet dropped the 1572, and they came out with the 1772. Now the 1772 was only produced for the 1 year, and it's got the D640. It's a 17 horsepower Kubota, and the only other real differences with the 1772 compared to the 15, The radiator on the D640, since it's 2 horsepower more, they increased the radiator just a little bit bigger on these. Other than that, it was the same thing as a 1572. The 1572s and the 1772s had cutouts in the side panels, and that was for increased airflow to keep the engines cool. So once 1990 hit, they went on with the Cyclops series, and I don't really do much on them. They got quite a few good models they come out with. They come out with a Kubota gas. They continued the diesel, etc. as well, but 89's where I stop. The metal hoods, that's as far as I go. I still like the old International look, when they started it. So once 1990 hit and they changed the plastic, it just sort of, the nostalgic reasons for me, it just doesn't interest me. So they're not bad tractors, it's just I lost interest in them. So that's pretty much most of the things you need to know about a super garden tractor. A lot of the facts. If I missed out on anything that would be beneficial that anyone else knows, please comment below in the comments so we know. I'll continue to keep doing more of these Cub Cadet videos. Thanks for watching.